He swore he'll never marry, until the determined intern stepped into the office. The burgundy blazer caught his eye first, not because of how it fit, but because the woman wearing it was about to destroy every rule he'd lived by for 8 years. Nathan Cross had sworn he'd never marry again, never trust another woman with his empire. But when this intern walked into his corner office and challenged a $40 million deal with nothing but confidence and a portfolio, everything changed. What he didn't know was that trusting her would either make him richer than ever, or cost him everything he'd built. Because the woman calling herself an intern wasn't who she claimed to be. Before we get deep into the story, please let me know in the comment where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you're hooked in and ready to enjoy this story, because tomorrow, I have another beautiful story to share with you and I don't want you to miss it for anything. Now, let's get into the story. Nathan Cross had built his empire on 3 simple rules. Work harder than everyone else, trust no one completely, and never let emotion cloud judgment. The third rule had served him particularly well since the day he'd found his fiancée in their bed with his business partner, stealing both his heart and half his company in one devastating blow. That was 8 years ago. 8 years of building Cross Industries into a Fortune 500 powerhouse, 8 years of perfectly pressed suits and perfectly controlled meetings, 8 years of saying never again to anything that resembled forever. His corner office on the 32nd floor reflected this philosophy. Clean lines, muted colors, not a single personal photograph in sight. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric shadows across his mahogany desk where quarterly reports lay spread like battle plans. At 34, Nathan had everything he'd ever wanted professionally. Personally, he'd convinced himself he wanted nothing. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his review of acquisition targets. "Mr. Cross." His assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. "The new intern is here for her orientation meeting." Nathan glanced at his Rolex, 9 a.m. sharp. He appreciated punctuality, even if he couldn't remember requesting an intern. His HR department had a habit of making decisions and informing him later, a practice he tolerated only because they were exceptionally good at their jobs. "Send her in." He didn't look up immediately when the door opened, a power play he'd perfected over years of negotiations. Instead, he continued scanning the acquisition report, letting whoever had entered wait in the subtle discomfort of silence. It was only when he heard the confident click of heels crossing his office, not the tentative shuffle he expected from a nervous intern, that he finally raised his eyes. The woman standing before his desk was not what he'd anticipated. She wore a burgundy blazer that complemented her deep skin tone beautifully, paired with a matching skirt that struck the perfect balance between professional and feminine. Her natural hair formed a crown of soft curls that framed an intelligent face with warm brown eyes that met his gaze directly, unflinchingly. She held a leather portfolio against her side and stood with the posture of someone who belonged in boardrooms, not fetching coffee. "Mr. Cross," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Jasmine Walker. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Her handshake was firm, her voice clear and confident. Nathan found himself standing without realizing it, drawn up by some instinct he'd thought he'd buried years ago. "Ms. Walker." He accepted her handshake, noting the warmth of her skin, the steadiness of her grip. "Please, have a seat." As she settled into the chair across from his desk, Nathan caught himself appreciating the graceful way she moved, the confidence that seemed to radiate from her very presence. He cleared his throat and reached for the intern file his assistant had left on his desk that morning, suddenly eager to understand who this woman was and what she was doing in his office. "I have to admit," he said, scanning the document, "I wasn't aware we were taking on new interns this quarter." "Actually, I specifically requested to work here," Jasmine replied, crossing her legs and leaning forward slightly. "Your reputation in corporate restructuring precedes you. I've studied several of your acquisitions, particularly the Hartwell manufacturing turnaround. Brilliant work." Nathan's eyebrows rose. Hartwell had been a complex deal, one that most people in the industry still didn't fully understand. "You're familiar with the Hartwell acquisition?" I wrote my master's thesis on it. She smiled, and Nathan felt something stir in his chest, a combination of surprise and something dangerously close to attraction. Well, on the ethical implications of rapid corporate restructuring in manufacturing. Your approach preserved jobs while maximizing efficiency. It was inspiring. Master's thesis. Nathan looked at her file again, really reading it this time. MBA from Wharton, summa cum laude. Previous experience at Goldman Sachs. Specialized focus on corporate strategy and ethics. This wasn't an intern in any traditional sense. This was someone who could probably run her own division. Ms. Walker, he said slowly, with credentials like these, why are you here as an intern? You could have your pick of executive positions. For the first time since she'd entered his office, Jasmine's confidence wavered slightly. She glanced down at her hands, then back up at him with a vulnerability that made his chest tighten. Honestly, I'm starting over. Her voice was quieter now, more personal. I spent the last 3 years helping my mother through cancer treatment. When she passed 6 months ago, I realized I'd been away from the corporate world long enough that doors weren't opening the way they once did. I could have fought for an executive position somewhere, probably would have gotten one eventually, but I wanted to earn my place. And I wanted to learn from the best. The honesty in her voice, the strength it must have taken to step away from a promising career for family and then swallow her pride to start again. Nathan felt his carefully constructed walls shift slightly. This woman wasn't just beautiful and intelligent. She had character. Depth. The kind of integrity he'd once believed in before cynicism had taken root. I'm sorry for your loss, he said, and meant it. Thank you. She straightened, the vulnerability disappearing behind professional composure again. But I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here to work. To contribute. To learn from someone who's built something extraordinary. Something extraordinary. When was the last time someone had described his work that way? Most people called it ruthless, efficient, profitable, but extraordinary? That suggested a vision beyond mere numbers, and Nathan found himself wondering what else Jasmine Walker might see that others missed. What did you have in mind? He asked, surprising himself. He'd planned to hand her off to HR, let them find her a suitable department for whatever busywork interns typically did. But something about her made him curious. I'd like to shadow you, she said without hesitation. Observe your decision-making process, sit in on strategy meetings, contribute where I can. I know it's unconventional, but I'm not looking for a typical internship experience. The request was bold, bordering on audacious. Nathan's schedule was packed with high-level meetings, confidential negotiations, decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. Taking on a shadow, even one with impressive credentials, would be a distraction he couldn't afford. And yet, that's quite a request, Ms. Walker. I know it is. She leaned forward again, her eyes lighting up with the kind of passion Nathan rarely saw in corporate America anymore. But I'm not asking you to babysit me. I want to add value. I've spent months analyzing your company's market position, and I have ideas. Insights that might surprise you. Insights that might surprise me. The woman had confidence. Nathan had to give her that. It was attractive, dangerously so. Everything about her was dangerous to his carefully ordered world. Her intelligence, her determination, the way she looked at him like she could see past his defenses to something worth reaching. What do you think Nathan should do? Should he take a chance on Jasmine or stick to his usual business-only approach? Let me know in the comments what you'd do in his position. All right, Ms. Walker, he heard himself saying. You've got my attention. But I should warn you, I don't do anything halfway. If you're going to shadow me, you'll need to keep up. 16-hour days, weekend calls, decisions that need to be made in seconds. Think you can handle that? Her smile was radiant, transforming her entire face and making Nathan's pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with business. Mr. Cross, she said, standing and extending her hand again. You won't even know I'm there." As Nathan shook her hand for the second time, feeling that same warmth spread up his arm, he had the distinct feeling that Jasmine Walker was wrong. He had a suspicion he'd be very, very aware of her presence. And for the first time in 8 years, that didn't terrify him as much as it should have. The first 3 days of Jasmine's shadowing experiment had been a revelation, though not in the way Nathan had expected. She wasn't just keeping up, she was anticipating. While he was still processing quarterly projections, she was already pulling up market trend analyses. When he paused to consider acquisition risks, she had regulatory compliance reports ready. It was like having a perfectly synchronized business partner, except one who smelled like vanilla and jasmine and whose laugh during conference calls made him lose his train of thought. By Thursday morning, Nathan was beginning to understand why his assistant, Margaret, had started bringing an extra coffee to his office each day. Jasmine had seamlessly integrated herself into his routine, and he found himself looking forward to her insights on everything from market volatility to the terrible coffee in the executive break room. "The Meridian deal is falling apart," Nathan announced as he entered his office that morning, loosening his tie with more force than necessary. The 7 a.m. call with the pharmaceutical company's board had gone about as well as a root canal. Jasmine looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reviewing the Meridian file since 6:30. She'd beaten him to the office again, something that both impressed and mildly irritated him. In the early morning light streaming through his windows, her burgundy blouse, a different one from Monday, but the same rich color that had caught his attention, seemed to glow against her skin. "The FDA concerns?" she asked, closing her laptop with deliberate calm. "They are spooked. Think the regulatory approval timeline is too aggressive." Nathan dropped into his chair and ran a hand through his hair. 6 months of negotiations, and it was crumbling over bureaucratic anxiety. They want to pull out entirely. What if they're not wrong? Nathan's head snapped up. In 3 days, Jasmine had offered insights, alternatives, optimizations, but she'd never contradicted him directly. "Excuse me." She stood slowly, moving around his desk with that graceful confidence he'd been trying not to notice. The subtle click of her heels on the marble floor seemed unusually loud in the morning quiet. When she reached his side, she leaned over his shoulder to point at something on his computer screen, and Nathan caught that intoxicating scent of her perfume mixed with something uniquely her. "Look at these timelines," she said, her voice soft near his ear. "Meridian's rushing because they need the capital injection, but their Phase 3 trials aren't as solid as they're claiming. The FDA isn't being paranoid, they're being realistic." Nathan found himself studying her profile as she spoke, the way her brow furrowed slightly in concentration, how her lips moved with precision around each technical term. When she turned her head slightly, they were suddenly face to face, mere inches apart. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Her eyes, those warm, intelligent brown eyes, met his, and Nathan felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd been carefully maintaining. "What are you suggesting?" His voice came out rougher than intended. Jasmine straightened, breaking the moment, but Nathan could see the slight flush in her cheeks. "Let them walk," she said simply. "Let them walk." Nathan's business instincts warred with something else, the growing trust he had in her judgment. "Jasmine, this is a $250,000 deal. It's a $250,000 mistake waiting to happen." She moved back to her chair, but her eyes never left his. "I've been running numbers on their competitor, Vita Tech. Smaller company, but their drug pipeline is cleaner. Less regulatory risk, better long-term potential. And..." She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "They're desperate for a partner." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You've been working other angles." "I always work other angles. Learned that from studying your Hartwell acquisition, actually. You had 3 backup plans when the primary negotiation stalled." The woman had been taking notes on his strategies, analyzing his methods, learning from approaches he'd used years ago. Most people in his organization followed his lead. Jasmine was apparently learning to think like him. It was simultaneously flattering and deeply attractive. "Show me what you've got on Vita Tech." For the next hour, Jasmine walked him through her analysis. Her presentation was flawless: detailed financial projections, risk assessments, market positioning strategies. But it was more than just the numbers. She'd identified cultural compatibility factors, management synergies, even potential integration challenges he hadn't considered. As she spoke, Nathan found himself watching the passion in her expression, the way her hands moved when she explained complex concepts, the confidence that radiated from every gesture. "This is exceptional work," he said when she finished. "When did you have time to put this together?" "I don't sleep much," she admitted with a slight shrug. "Old habit from graduate school. Plus, I find your business fascinating. The way you identify value where others see risk, how you transform companies without destroying their identity. It's like watching an artist work." An artist. Nathan couldn't remember the last time someone had described his work in creative terms. Ruthless, efficient, profitable. Those were the adjectives usually applied to his methods. But artistic. That suggested she saw something in his approach beyond mere profit margins. "You realize," he said slowly, "that if we pursue Vita Tech, you'll essentially be the architect of a major acquisition strategy." "I realize that." Her voice was steady, but he caught the excitement flickering in her eyes. "The question is whether you trust my judgment enough to act on it." Trust. The word hung between them like a challenge. Nathan had built his empire on trusting no one completely, on maintaining control through careful distance. But sitting here, looking at this brilliant woman who'd essentially redesigned his next major business move, he felt that distance shrinking. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Vita Tech's CEO is in town today. Says he's available if you want to meet." Interesting timing. Nathan showed Jasmine the message, and her face lit up with genuine excitement. "It's like the universe is confirming your decision," she said. "My decision?" "To trust me." She stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. "Because you are going to call him, aren't you?" The vulnerability in that question, the slight uncertainty beneath her confidence, did something to Nathan's chest. Here was a woman who'd walked into his office 4 days ago and systematically dismantled every preconception he'd had about interns, about trust, about keeping his professional and personal lives separate. She'd shown him a different way to see a deal, a different way to approach risk, and somehow, without his permission, a different way to see himself. "Jasmine," he said, standing as well. They were facing each other across his desk, the morning sun casting them both in golden light. "Are you sure about this? If it goes wrong." "It won't go wrong." She stepped closer to the desk, her palms flat against its surface as she leaned forward slightly. "But even if it did, wouldn't you rather fail taking a calculated risk on something with real potential than succeed with something that's fundamentally flawed?" The intensity in her voice, the conviction in her posture, Nathan realized she wasn't just talking about the business deal anymore. There was subtext here, layers of meaning that had nothing to do with pharmaceutical companies and everything to do with the tension that had been building between them since Monday morning. "Do you think Nathan is right to trust Jasmine's business instincts, or is he letting attraction cloud his judgment? What would you do in his position? Share your thoughts below." He reached for his phone, never breaking eye contact with her. "Margaret, get me Vita Tech's CEO on the line. Tell him I'd like to discuss a potential partnership." The smile that spread across Jasmine's face was radiant, transforming her from beautiful to breathtaking in the space of a heartbeat. "You won't regret this," she said. "I know I won't," Nathan replied, and realized he was no longer talking about the business deal either. As Margaret's voice crackled back through the speaker confirming the meeting for that afternoon, Nathan found himself studying Jasmine's face, the genuine joy in her expression, the way she bit her lower lip to contain her excitement, the graceful line of her neck as she tilted her head back slightly in relief. 8 years ago, he'd sworn never to let emotion influence his business decisions. 8 years of maintaining perfect professional distance, of trusting his instincts above all else, of building an empire on the foundation of controlled isolation. And now, watching this remarkable woman who'd walked into his office and quietly revolutionized his perspective on everything, Nathan realized that some rules were meant to be broken. The Vita Tech meeting was set for 2 p.m. As Jasmine gathered her files with efficient grace, Nathan caught himself wondering when exactly his interest in her insights had shifted into something far more personal. When had professional admiration become attraction? When had attraction become something deeper? Nathan. Jasmine's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She was standing by the door, portfolio in hand, looking back at him with concern. "Are you all right?" The sound of his first name on her lips, when had she stopped calling him Mr. Cross, sent warmth spreading through his chest. "I'm fine," he said. "Just thinking about the presentation." She nodded, but her eyes suggested she knew he was thinking about more than just business. "I'll see you at lunch to prep for the Vita Tech meeting." "Absolutely." As the door closed behind her, Nathan sank back into his chair and stared at the space where she'd been standing. For 8 years, his office had been a sanctuary of solitude, a place where he could think clearly without the complications of human connection. Now it felt empty without her in it. He looked down at the Vita Tech file she'd prepared, each page marked with her neat handwriting, her insightful observations, her bold recommendations. This wasn't just exceptional business analysis, this was trust made tangible. She'd put her reputation, her credibility, her entire professional future in his hands by pushing him toward this deal. And he was about to bet $40 million on her judgment. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, as Nathan began preparing for the most important business meeting of the quarter, he found himself looking forward to having Jasmine Walker by his side. The woman who'd sworn she wouldn't even notice was becoming impossible to ignore. And for the first time since his engagement had imploded 8 years ago, Nathan Cross was beginning to think that might not be such a bad thing. The Vita Tech meeting had gone better than Nathan's most optimistic projections. Dr. Martin Reeves, Vita Tech's CEO, was everything Jasmine had promised: brilliant, pragmatic, and refreshingly direct. More importantly, he was desperate for the kind of partnership Cross Industries could provide. By 4 p.m., they had the framework for a deal that could potentially be worth twice what Meridian had offered, with half the regulatory risk. Nathan should have been celebrating. Instead, he was standing at his office window, watching the late afternoon sun paint the city in gold, trying to process what had happened during those 2 hours in the conference room. Jasmine hadn't just attended the meeting, she'd orchestrated it. While Nathan had focused on financial structures and timelines, she'd identified the human elements that made deals succeed or fail. When Dr. Reeves had expressed concern about maintaining Vita Tech's research culture post-acquisition, Jasmine had seamlessly pivoted to Cross Industries' track record of preserving company identities. When negotiations had stalled over intellectual property rights, she'd proposed a licensing structure that gave both parties what they needed. She'd been magnificent. Professional, insightful, commanding the room with a quiet authority that had impressed even Nathan's most skeptical board members. And every time she'd glanced his way for confirmation or support, every time she deferred to his expertise while asserting her own, Nathan had felt something shift deeper in his chest. Second thoughts. Her voice from the doorway made him turn. Jasmine had changed from her meeting attire into a softer cream-colored blouse that made her skin glow in the afternoon light. She'd loosened her hair slightly, and a few curls framed her face in a way that made Nathan's throat tighten. About the deal. No. He moved away from the window, noting how her eyes tracked his movement. About you. Possibly. She stepped fully into his office, closing the door behind her, something she'd never done before. The soft click seemed to change the atmosphere, making the space feel more intimate, more charged. What do you mean? Nathan studied her face, looking for some sign that she felt the same undercurrent of tension that had been building between them all week. You're not really an intern, are you, Jasmine? A small smile played at her lips. I never claimed to be. I said I wanted to start over, to learn from the best. That doesn't make me incompetent. No, he agreed, moving closer. It makes you dangerous. Dangerous how? They were standing near his desk now, close enough that Nathan could see the flecks of amber in her brown eyes, could catch that subtle scent of vanilla and jasmine that had been driving him quietly insane all week. You make me want to break my own rules. The admission hung between them like a confession. Jasmine's breath caught slightly, her lips parting in surprise. What rules? The ones that have kept me sane for 8 years. The ones that say emotion and business don't mix. The ones that say trust is a luxury I can't afford. His voice dropped lower. The ones that say I'm never getting married. Nathan. Her voice was soft, uncertain. What are you saying? Before he could answer, his phone rang, shattering the moment. Nathan glanced at the caller ID and cursed under his breath. I have to take this. It's the Meridian board chair. Jasmine stepped back, nodding, but Nathan caught the disappointment that flashed across her face before she masked it with professional composure. Richard, Nathan answered, his voice shifting to business mode even as his eyes remained on Jasmine. I wasn't expecting to hear from you today. Cut the pleasantries, Cross. Richard Meridian's voice was sharp with anger. I just got a very interesting call from Martin Reeves. Apparently, you decided to pursue our competitor while our deal was still on the table. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. Your board made it clear they were pulling out. I moved on to other opportunities. We were negotiating. That's what negotiations look like, back and forth, compromise. Not running to our biggest rival the moment things get complicated. Richard. No, you listen. I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've never seen such unprofessional conduct. And word on the street is that you're taking advice from some intern? Have you lost your mind? Nathan's eyes snapped to Jasmine, who had clearly heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. Her face had gone pale, and she was backing toward the door. My business decisions are my own, Nathan said coldly. Not when they affect existing partnerships, they're not. Let me be very clear, Cross, if you proceed with Vita Tech, Meridian will make sure every pharmaceutical company in the country knows exactly what kind of partner you are. Your reputation won't survive it. The line went dead. Nathan stared at his phone for a moment, processing the implications. Richard Meridian wasn't just angry, he was threatening an industry-wide campaign that could destroy Cross Industries' standing in the pharmaceutical sector. I should go. Jasmine's voice was quiet, strained. No. Nathan looked up to find her halfway to the door. This isn't your fault. Isn't it? She turned back to him, and Nathan was shocked to see tears threatening in her eyes. I pushed you toward this deal. I convinced you to trust my judgment, and now I'm exactly where I should be. Nathan moved toward her, his voice firm. Jasmine, the Vita Tech deal is solid. Better than solid, it's brilliant. Meridian is throwing a tantrum because they know they lost something valuable. But your reputation. My reputation was built on making smart business decisions, not on appeasing Richard Meridian's ego. He reached for her hands, noting how they trembled slightly in his. I trust your analysis. More than that, I trust you. The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over, and Jasmine wiped them away with an frustrated gesture. You barely know me, Nathan. 4 days ago, I was a stranger who walked into your office. Now you're risking everything on my word. Are you having second thoughts about the deal? No, the deal is sound. It's. She pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself. It's everything else I'm second-guessing. Such as. This. She gestured between them. Whatever this is that's happening between us. I came here to rebuild my career, not to complicate yours. Not to be the reason you break rules you've kept for 8 years. Nathan stepped closer, close enough to see the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide. What if I want those rules broken? What if you don't? What if this is just proximity and adrenaline and the excitement of a big deal? What if in a week, when the dust settles, you regret everything? The fear in her voice, the way she was protecting herself even as she leaned toward him, it reminded Nathan of his own carefully constructed walls. The difference was that Jasmine's defenses seemed designed to protect him as much as herself. "Jasmine, look at me." When she finally met his eyes, Nathan saw his own confusion reflected back at him. The careful professional distance they'd maintained was crumbling, replaced by something neither of them had planned for. "I can't promise I won't regret this," he said honestly. "I can't promise it won't complicate everything. But I can promise that what I feel for you has nothing to do with proximity or adrenaline. It has to do with the way you see possibilities where others see problems. The way you challenge me to be better. The way you make me remember what it felt like to believe in something beyond profit margins." "Nathan, I know it's crazy. I know it goes against everything I've believed about keeping business and personal separate. But maybe." He reached up to touch her face, his thumb brushing away a lingering tear. "Maybe some things are worth the risk." Before she could respond, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, expecting another angry missive from Richard Meridian. Instead, it was from Dr. Reeves. "Just heard from Meridian. If anything, their reaction convinces me we're making the right choice. Looking forward to moving ahead with Cross Industries." Nathan showed Jasmine the message, and her face transformed with relief and something that looked like hope. "He's not backing down," she whispered. "Neither am I." Nathan's voice was firm. "About the deal or about us?" "Things are getting intense. Do you think Nathan and Jasmine should take the risk on both the business deal and their growing feelings, or should they stay professional? What would you do? Let me know your thoughts." Jasmine searched his face, and Nathan could see her weighing options, calculating risks the same way she'd approached the Vitatech analysis. Finally, she stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "If we do this," she said quietly, "if we cross this line, everything changes. I know. Your reputation, my career, the power dynamic. I know." He moved his hand to the back of her neck, feeling the soft curls there. "Are you trying to talk me out of it?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing." Nathan looked into her eyes, those intelligent, warm, honest eyes that had been haunting his thoughts for 4 days, and realized he'd already made his choice. It had happened somewhere between her first confident handshake and her brilliant presentation that afternoon. Maybe it had happened the moment she'd walked into his office, challenging every assumption he'd made about keeping his life perfectly compartmentalized. "I'm choosing you," he said simply. The kiss was inevitable, had been building since the moment she'd leaned over his shoulder that morning and challenged his perspective on everything. When their lips met, Nathan felt 8 years of careful control shatter. Jasmine's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Nathan realized that all his rules about emotional distance had been nothing more than fear dressed up as business strategy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jasmine rested her forehead against his. "This is either the best decision we've ever made," she whispered, "or the biggest mistake." "Only one way to find out," Nathan replied, his arms tightening around her. Outside his office windows, the sun was setting over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Tomorrow, they would face Richard Meridian's threats, navigate the complexities of their changing relationship, and finalize a deal that could define both their careers. But tonight, in the quiet sanctuary of Nathan's office, with Jasmine warm and real in his arms, all of that seemed manageable. For the first time in 8 years, Nathan Cross was choosing his heart over his head. And it felt like coming home. As Jasmine pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with tears and hope and something that might have been love, Nathan realized that the woman who'd sworn she'd be invisible had become the most important person in his world. The question now was whether they were strong enough to build something real in the complicated space between professional ambition and personal desire. Looking at Jasmine's face, radiant with possibility and determination, Nathan thought they just might be. The crisis hit at 6:47 a.m. on Friday morning, delivered via an emergency call from Nathan's lead board member, Victoria Sterling. Nathan was still in his apartment, savoring his first peaceful morning in years, when her voice crackled through his phone with the controlled fury of someone trying not to scream. "Nathan, we have a problem. A big one." He sat up in bed, instantly alert. "What's happened?" Richard Meridian made good on his threat. "There's an article in the Financial Journal this morning questioning your judgment, specifically regarding your reliance on unqualified personnel for major acquisition decisions. It mentions Jasmine by name." Nathan's blood turned to ice. "Send me the link." As Victoria's email arrived, Nathan felt his carefully constructed world begin to shake. The article, titled "When CEOs Lose Perspective: The Dangerous Influence of Personal Relationships on Corporate Strategy," was a masterpiece of professional assassination disguised as industry analysis. It didn't quite accuse Nathan of impropriety, but it painted a picture of a once brilliant executive who had lost his objectivity to an attractive intern with questionable credentials. The worst part was how they'd twisted the truth. Jasmine's Wharton MBA was mentioned but downplayed. Her Goldman Sachs experience was dismissed as brief and unremarkable. Her role in the VitaTech deal was characterized as an intern overstepping her bounds while her supervisor lost sight of appropriate professional boundaries. "Victoria," Nathan said, his voice deadly calm, "who are our sources saying leaked this information?" "Meridian's people, obviously. But Nathan, that's not our biggest problem. The board is meeting in an hour. Emergency session. They want answers about your decision-making process, and specifically about Ms. Walker's influence on company strategy." Nathan closed his eyes. An emergency board meeting meant his position as CEO was under review. 8 years of building cross industries into an empire, and it could all crumble because he dared to trust someone, professionally and personally. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. Nathan, you need to be prepared. Some of the board members are concerned about your judgment, about the company's reputation. This VitaTech deal, combined with the speculation about your relationship with Ms. Walker. My relationship with Jasmine is not up for board review. It is when it affects a $40 million acquisition decision." The line went dead, leaving Nathan staring at his phone in the growing morning light. He should call Jasmine, warn her about the article, prepare her for what was coming. Instead, he found himself paralyzed by a familiar fear, the same terror that had consumed him 8 years ago when his fiancée's betrayal had cost him everything. Was he making the same mistake again? Had he let emotion cloud his judgment? Was Jasmine worth losing everything he'd built? By the time he arrived at the office, Nathan had steeled himself for battle. He'd faced hostile takeover attempts, regulatory investigations, and industry downturns. He could handle his own board. What he wasn't prepared for was finding Jasmine's desk empty. "Where is she?" he asked Margaret, who was hovering near his office door with the anxious expression of someone delivering bad news. "She left about 20 minutes ago." She read the article, Mr. Cross. She seemed quite upset. Nathan felt his chest constrict. "Did she say where she was going?" "No, sir. But she left this." Margaret handed him a cream-colored envelope with his name written in Jasmine's elegant script. Nathan's hands were steadier than he felt as he opened it. "Nathan, by the time you read this, you'll know about the Financial Journal article. I'm sure you'll also be dealing with the fallout from your board and investors. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. The VitaTech deal is sound. Pursue it with confidence. My analysis was thorough, and Dr. Reeves is exactly the partner Cross Industries needs. Don't let Meridian's tantrum cost you a brilliant opportunity. As for us, I think we both knew this was complicated from the beginning. I just didn't realize how much my presence in your life could cost you. I meant what I said about earning my place, but I won't do it at your expense. Thank you for seeing me as more than just an intern. Thank you for trusting my judgment. Thank you for 4 days that reminded me why I love this business. I've submitted my resignation to HR. Please don't try to find me. J. Nathan read the letter twice, his hands clenching the paper with enough force to leave creases. She was protecting him. Again. Just like she'd protected Vitatech's interests in the negotiation, just like she'd protected his reputation by questioning her own role, Jasmine was sacrificing herself to save him from the consequences of their relationship. The woman was brilliant, selfless, and completely wrong if she thought he was going to let her walk away. Sir. Margaret's voice seemed to come from very far away. The board meeting is in 15 minutes. Nathan looked up at his assistant, seeing his own reflection in her worried expression. Margaret, I need you to find Jasmine. Check her apartment, local hotels, anywhere she might go. When you find her, tell her not to make any decisions until she talks to me. Sir, the board. We'll have to wait. Nathan straightened his tie and gathered the Vitatech files from his desk. I have something more important to handle first. The boardroom was a temple of corporate authority, mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Normally, Nathan felt completely at home here. Today, facing 12 of the most powerful people in his industry, he felt like he was walking into a trial. Victoria Sterling sat at the far end of the table, her silver hair pulled back severely, her expression giving nothing away. To her left was James Morrison, the company's largest investor, whose disapproval was written in every line of his weathered face. The other board members watched Nathan with varying degrees of concern, curiosity, and barely concealed judgment. Nathan, Victoria began without preamble, we've all read the Financial Journal article. We need to understand exactly what happened with the Meridian situation and Ms. Walker's role in your decision-making process. Nathan remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. Jasmine Walker provided exceptional analysis that identified significant flaws in the Meridian deal and superior opportunities with Vitatech. Her recommendations were thorough, insightful, and ultimately correct. She's an intern, James Morrison interjected, with no significant corporate experience and questionable credentials. Are you seriously telling us you based a $40 million decision on the advice of someone you'd known for less than a week? I'm telling you I based a $40 million decision on superior analysis, regardless of its source. Nathan's voice remained calm, professional. Would you prefer I ignore brilliant insights because they come from someone without a corner office? Would prefer you maintain appropriate professional boundaries, Victoria said coolly. The article raises serious questions about your objectivity, Nathan. About whether personal feelings compromised your business judgment. My personal feelings are irrelevant to this discussion. Are they? Morrison leaned forward. Because from where we sit, it looks like you abandoned a solid existing deal to pursue the recommendations of a woman you're romantically involved with. How is that not a conflict of interest? The room fell silent. Nathan looked around the table, seeing 8 years of partnership and trust hanging in the balance. These people had supported him through every major decision, had trusted his instincts when others doubted. Now they were questioning the fundamental integrity that had made cross-industries successful. You want to know about conflict of interest? Nathan said finally. Let me tell you about conflict of interest. Richard Meridian's deal was failing because their Phase 3 trials are weaker than they admitted. Their FDA timeline was unrealistic, and their financials don't support the valuation they were demanding. But instead of accepting that their proposal wasn't viable, Meridian decided to attack my character and Ms. Walker's reputation. He moved around the table, making eye contact with each board member. Vitatech offers everything Meridian promised and more: better drugs, cleaner pipeline, stronger leadership, and a partnership structure that protects our interests while maximizing growth potential. The analysis supporting this conclusion was provided by someone with an MBA from Wharton, previous experience at Goldman Sachs, and insights that none of us, myself included, had considered. But Nathan, Victoria said gently, the appearance of impropriety is exactly what Richard Meridian was hoping for when he planted this story. Nathan's voice grew harder. He couldn't win on the merits of his deal, so he decided to make this about everything except business. And apparently, it's working. Morrison's face was red with frustration. You're missing the point entirely. It's not about the quality of Ms. Walker's analysis. It's about the appearance that your personal relationship with her influenced your professional judgment. And you're missing my point entirely. Nathan placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. My relationship with Jasmine Walker, professional or personal, is based on respect for her intelligence, integrity, and business acumen. If this board is more concerned with appearance than with results, then perhaps we have a fundamental disagreement about what makes cross-industries successful. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan could see the board members exchanging glances, calculating, weighing options. Victoria's expression was unreadable, but Morrison looked like he was ready to call for a vote of no confidence. Where is Ms. Walker now? Victoria asked finally. She resigned this morning. Decided that her presence was damaging to the company's reputation. That was wise of her. No, Nathan said firmly. It was a mistake. And if this board forces me to choose between the company's reputation and doing what's right, then you're asking me to become exactly the kind of leader I swore I'd never be. Morrison stood abruptly. Nathan, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. Again. Just like you did 8 years ago with your fiancée. The comparison hit Nathan like a physical blow. 8 years ago, he'd trusted the wrong person for the wrong reasons, and it had cost him everything. The board was suggesting he was making the same mistake with Jasmine. But as Nathan thought about the past week, Jasmine's insights, her integrity, her willingness to sacrifice her own interests for his success, he realized how fundamentally different this situation was. You're right, he said quietly. 8 years ago, I let emotion cloud my judgment. I trusted someone who was using me for their own gain, someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than a partner. But Jasmine Walker has done the opposite of everything Rebecca did. Instead of taking credit, she's deferred it. Instead of seeking personal gain, she's sacrificed for the company's benefit. Instead of manipulating me, she's challenged me to be better. He straightened, looking around the room with new clarity. If this board cannot see the difference between someone who exploits trust and someone who earns it, then perhaps it's time for me to reconsider my position here. The threat was implicit but unmistakable. Nathan Cross had built Cross Industries from nothing. Without him, the company would survive, but it would never be the same. Victoria cleared her throat. Nathan, no one is questioning your value to this company. We're simply concerned about the risks associated with this situation. Then let me make this simple for you, Nathan said. I'm proceeding with the Vita Tech acquisition because it's the right business decision. I'm going to find Jasmine Walker and convince her to stay because losing her would be a mistake Cross Industries can't afford. And if either of those actions is unacceptable to this board, then I'll submit my resignation and take my chances elsewhere. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Victoria nodded slowly. We'll table this discussion pending the outcome of the Vita Tech negotiations. If the deal proceeds as projected, we'll revisit the matter of Ms. Walker's employment. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't defeat either. Nathan nodded curtly and headed for the door. Nathan, Victoria called after him. For what it's worth, I hope you're right about her. So do I, Nathan replied, though he was no longer talking about the business deal. As he left the boardroom, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Found her. She's at the Meridian Hotel downtown. Room 1247. The irony of Jasmine hiding at a hotel owned by his nemesis wasn't lost on Nathan. As he grabbed his keys and headed for the elevator, he realized that everything, his career, his company, his future, now depended on convincing the most stubborn, brilliant, selfless woman he'd ever met that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant risking everything else. The Meridian Hotel's lobby was a monument to understated luxury. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the kind of hushed elegance that whispered money at every turn. Nathan felt the irony of the location as he approached the elevator bank. Richard Meridian owned this hotel, which meant Jasmine had chosen to hide in enemy territory. Whether that was intentional defiance or cosmic coincidence, Nathan couldn't decide. Room 1247 was at the end of a long hallway lined with expensive artwork. Nathan stood outside the door for a full minute, gathering his thoughts. Through the wood, he could hear the faint sound of a television, the kind of background noise people use to fill silence when they were trying not to think. He knocked softly. "Housekeeping already came," Jasmine's voice called out, muffled but unmistakably tired. "It's me." A long pause. Then the sound of footsteps, slow and reluctant. The door opened just wide enough for Jasmine to see him, and Nathan's chest tightened at the sight of a face. She'd been crying, her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual composure replaced by exhaustion. "How did you find me?" "Margaret is very resourceful." Nathan studied her face, noting the vulnerability she was no longer trying to hide. "Can I come in?" Jasmine hesitated, then stepped back to let him enter. The hotel room was immaculate except for her laptop open on the desk, surrounded by scattered papers. She'd been working, Nathan realized. Even in hiding, even after resigning, she'd been working. "What are you doing here, Nathan?" She closed the door but remained near it, as if ready to flee. "I could ask you the same question. Of all the hotels in the city, you chose Richard Meridian's." A ghost of a smile flickered across her face. It seemed fitting. Hide in plain sight in the lion's den. Or maybe you wanted to punish yourself for something that wasn't your fault. Jasmine moved to the window, wrapping her arms around herself. She'd changed out of her business attire into jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. "Did you read the article?" "Every word." "Then you know why I had to leave." Nathan approached slowly, giving her space but closing the distance between them. "I know Richard Meridian is a vindictive bastard who tried to destroy both our reputations because his inadequate deal fell apart." "Nathan, be serious. Your board met this morning, didn't they? What did they say?" "They're concerned about appearances. About the company's reputation." Jasmine's shoulders sagged. "So I was right to leave." "No," Nathan said firmly. "You were wrong. Completely, utterly wrong." She turned to face him, confusion and hurt warring in her expression. "How can you say that? I've jeopardized everything you've worked for. Your position, your company's standing. You've made me remember who I wanted to be before I became so afraid of losing everything that I stopped living." Nathan moved closer, close enough to see the tears threatening in her eyes again. "Jasmine, 8 years ago I made promises to myself about never trusting anyone, never letting emotion influence business decisions, never risking my heart again. Those weren't rules, they were prison bars." "Nathan, let me finish." He reached for her hands, relieved when she didn't pull away. "You walked into my office and showed me that some risks are worth taking. The Vitatech deal isn't just superior to Meridian's, it's the kind of partnership that could define cross-industries for the next decade. Your analysis wasn't just thorough, it was visionary." "But the board?" "The board is run by people who've forgotten that business is ultimately about human connections. About trust and vision and believing in something bigger than quarterly profits." Nathan's voice grew stronger with conviction. "They're so concerned about appearance that they're willing to sacrifice substance. I won't do that. Not anymore." Jasmine searched his face, and Nathan could see her trying to process what he was saying. "What are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that I chose you. In that boardroom, when they asked me to choose between the company's reputation and doing what's right, I chose you. I chose us. I chose the future we could build together instead of the past I've been hiding in. The tears she'd been fighting finally spilled over. Nathan, you can't just throw away everything you've built for me. I won't let you do that. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally building something worth keeping. Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Jasmine, I love you. The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible distance. Jasmine's breath caught, her eyes widening with surprise and something that might have been hope. You love me. I love your brilliant mind and your fierce integrity. I love the way you see possibilities where others see problems. I love that you're stubborn enough to sacrifice your own happiness to protect mine, and brave enough to challenge a CEO you'd known for 4 days. Nathan's voice softened. I love that you made me remember what it feels like to believe in forever. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different, hopeful instead of heartbroken. Nathan, I know it's crazy. I know it's fast. I know it goes against every logical business principle I've ever followed. But I also know that the smartest decision I've made in 8 years was trusting your judgment about Vita Tech. The second smartest was admitting I'm falling in love with you. Jasmine's hands came up to cover his, holding them against her face. I love you too, she whispered. I've been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was just proximity and excitement and temporary insanity. But Nathan, I love the way you see potential in everything and everyone. I love that you built an empire but never forgot how to be kind. I love that you're brave enough to risk everything for what you believe in. The kiss was inevitable, born of relief and love and the bone-deep certainty that they belonged together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Come back to work, he said. Not as an intern. As my partner. In every sense of the word. Nathan, the board will never. The board will accept it because I'm not giving them a choice. And because once the Vita Tech deal closes successfully, they'll realize that questioning your judgment was the mistake, not trusting it. Jasmine pulled back to look at him, and Nathan saw his own determination reflected in her eyes. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we go back, there's no pretending this is just business anymore. Good, Nathan said firmly. I'm tired of pretending. An hour later, they walked into the Cross Industries building together. Word of Nathan's confrontation with the board had already spread through the office gossip network, and heads turned as they passed. Nathan didn't care. Let them stare. Let them whisper. He'd spent 8 years cultivating an image of perfect professional control, and it had nearly cost him the best thing that had ever happened to him. Margaret looked up as they approached Nathan's office, her face lighting up with relief. Mr. Cross. Ms. Walker. I'm so glad. Margaret, Nathan interrupted, please schedule a press conference for this afternoon. I want to address the Financial Journal article directly. Sir, are you sure that's wise? Perhaps legal should review. I'm sure. Also, please prepare new business cards for Ms. Walker. Title: Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. Margaret's eyebrows shot up, but she nodded. Right away, sir. As they entered Nathan's office, Jasmine caught his arm. Senior VP. Nathan, you can't just create a position that reflects your actual value to this company. Watch me. Nathan moved to his desk and picked up the phone. Victoria. It's Nathan. I need the board to reconvene in 2 hours. No, it's not about my resignation. It's about the future of Cross Industries. While Nathan made his calls, Jasmine moved to the window where he'd stood that morning, looking out at the city spread below them. When he joined her, she leaned into his warmth. What if this doesn't work? She asked quietly. What if the board refuses to accept us, or the press conference backfires, or Vita Tech gets cold feet? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind. Jasmine, I've spent 8 years playing it safe, making decisions based on fear instead of possibility. I won't do that anymore. Not with the company, and especially not with us." The press conference was a masterclass in controlled aggression. Nathan stood at the podium in the building's main conference room, facing a crowd of financial reporters and industry analysts, with Jasmine seated in the front row. He ditched the prepared remarks his PR team had written in favor of something more direct. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I called this conference to address the speculation surrounding Cross Industries' recent business decisions and personnel choices. The Financial Journal article published this morning contains several inaccuracies that I'd like to correct." Nathan proceeded to dismantle Richard Meridian's character assassination with surgical precision. He presented the VitaTech analysis in detail, highlighting the superior financial projections and reduced regulatory risks. He outlined Jasmine's credentials and the quality of her strategic recommendations. Most importantly, he addressed the relationship speculation head-on. "Ms. Walker and I have developed both a professional partnership and a personal relationship," he said, his voice clear and unwavering. "I want to be absolutely transparent about this because Cross Industries has always been built on integrity and trust. My feelings for Ms. Walker developed because of her exceptional professional capabilities, not despite them. Any suggestion that personal relationships have compromised my business judgment fundamentally misunderstands both the nature of our partnership and the strength of our strategic analysis." The questions that followed were predictably aggressive, but Nathan handled them with the same calm authority he brought to hostile negotiations. When a reporter asked whether he was concerned about the appearance of impropriety, Nathan's response was immediate. "I'm concerned about the appearance of cowardice. I'm concerned about what it says about our industry when brilliant analysis is dismissed because of its source, or when personal relationships are treated as inherently corrupting rather than potentially strengthening. Cross Industries will continue to make decisions based on merit, vision, and results, not on outdated notions about professional propriety." Final CTA. What do you think about Nathan's decision to go public with their relationship? Was he right to take such a bold stand, or should he have played it safer? Share your thoughts on how you'd handle this situation. The market's response was swift and decisive. By the closing bell, Cross Industries stock had risen 12%, driven largely by investor enthusiasm for the VitaTech partnership. More importantly, 3 other pharmaceutical companies had called requesting meetings about potential collaborations. The board meeting that evening was a very different affair from the morning's confrontation. Victoria Sterling opened with a simple statement: "The market has spoken. The VitaTech deal is being hailed as a strategic masterstroke, and investor confidence in Cross Industries is at an all-time high." Nathan sat at his usual place at the table, with Jasmine beside him in the chair that had been added for her new role. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. "I owe you an apology, Nathan," James Morrison said, his earlier hostility replaced by grudging respect. "And Ms. Walker, I owe you an even greater one. Your analysis was exceptional, and I allowed personal bias to cloud my judgment." "We all did," Victoria added. "Nathan, your instincts have never steered us wrong before. We should have trusted them, and you, this time as well." Nathan looked around the table, seeing respect where there had been suspicion that morning. "I appreciate that. But I want to be clear about something. My relationship with Jasmine isn't separate from my business judgment. It's an extension of it. She makes me better at everything I do, including leading this company. If that's a problem for anyone, we should discuss it now." The silence that followed was comfortable rather than tense. Finally, Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile Nathan had seen from her all day. "I think we're all beginning to understand that the best partnerships, whether business or personal, make us stronger than we could be alone." 6 months later, Nathan stood at the same office window where he'd spent so many mornings in solitary contemplation. The VitaTech acquisition had exceeded every projection, opening new markets and partnerships that positioned Cross Industries as a leader in pharmaceutical innovation. The Financial Journal had published a follow-up article titled When Love and Logic Align, the cross-industry success story, featuring Jasmine prominently as an example of unconventional leadership approaches. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't what made Nathan smile as he watched the sunrise paint the city in gold. Admiring your empire. Jasmine's voice came from the doorway, warm with affection and gentle teasing. Nathan turned to find her approaching with 2 cups of coffee, her engagement ring catching the morning light. The proposal had happened 3 weeks ago, in this same office, with the same view spread out before them. Nathan had finally understood that the empire he'd built meant nothing without someone to share it with. Admiring my future, he corrected, accepting the coffee and pulling her into his arms. Jasmine settled against his chest, both of them looking out at the city that had witnessed their transformation from strangers to partners to something eternal. "Any regrets?" she asked, a question that had become their morning ritual. "Only that it took me 8 years to be brave enough to break my own rules," Nathan replied, his standard answer. "And I only regret that I almost walked away from the best decision I ever made," Jasmine added, completing their ritual. As they stood together in the growing light, Nathan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, he'd been a man who swore he'd never marry, who built walls around his heart and called it good business. Now he was planning a wedding, running a company with the woman he loved, and discovering daily that the greatest risk he'd ever taken had yielded the greatest reward. Jasmine had been right about many things, but she'd been wrong about one crucial point. She'd promised she'd be invisible, that he wouldn't even notice her presence. Instead, she'd become the center of everything. His business partner, his best friend, his future wife, the woman who'd taught him that the strongest foundations were built not on fear, but on trust. The curvy intern who'd stepped into his office in a burgundy blazer had indeed changed everything. She'd shown him that some rules were meant to be broken, that some risks were worth taking, and that the best business decisions, like the best life decisions, were made with both head and heart engaged. As morning fully broke over the city, Nathan Cross smiled and held his future a little tighter. He'd sworn he'd never marry. Thank God he'd been wrong. Sometimes the greatest success comes not from playing it safe, but from having the courage to trust someone who challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself. Nathan and Jasmine's story reminds us that the best partnerships, in business and in life, are built on mutual respect, shared vision, and the willingness to take calculated risks for extraordinary rewards.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.